April 15, 1920. A paymaster and his guard were carrying a factory payroll of $15,776 through the main street of South Braintree, Massachusetts. Two men standing by a fence suddenly pulled out guns and fired on them. The gunmen snatched up the cash boxes dropped by the mortally wounded pair and jumped into a waiting automobile. Three weeks later, on the evening of May 5, 1920, two Italians, Niccolo Sacco and Bartolomeo Vanzetti, fell into a police trap that had been set for a suspect in the Braintree crime. Although originally not under suspicion, both men were carrying guns at the time of their arrest, and when questioned by the authorities, they lied. As a result, they were held and eventually indicted for the South Braintree crimes. Vanzetti was also charged with an earlier hold-up attempt that had taken place on December 24, 1919, in the nearby town of Bridgewater.
Vanzetti was first tried in the summer of 1920 on the lesser of the two charges, the failed Bridgewater robbery. Most of Vanzetti's witnesses were Italians who spoke English poorly, and their trial testimony, given largely in translation, failed to convince the American jury. Vanzetti's case had also been seriously damaged when he, for fear of revealing his radical activities, did not take the stand in his own defense. For the first criminal offense, in which no one was hurt, Vanzetti received a sentence that was much harsher than usual, 10 to 15 years. The arrest of Sacco and Vanzetti had coincided with a period of the most intense political repression in the American history, the Red Scare. The police trap they had fallen into had been set for a comrade of theirs, suspected primarily because he was a foreign-born radical. On the night of their arrest, authorities found in Sacco's pocket a draft of a handbill for an anarchist meeting that featured Vanzetti as the main speaker. The lawyer decided it was no longer possible to defend Sacco and Vanzetti solely against the criminal charges of murder and robbery. Instead, he would have them frankly acknowledge their anarchism in court, try to establish that their arrest and prosecution stemmed from their radical activities, and dispute the prosecution's insistence that only hard, non-political evidence had implicated the two men in common crimes. After a hard-fought trial of 6 weeks, during which the themes of patriotism and radicalism were often sharply contrasted by the prosecution and the defense, the jury found Sacco and Vanzetti guilty of robbery and murder on July 14, 1921. This verdict marked, however, only the beginning of a lengthy legal struggle to save the two men. It extended until 1927, during which time the defense had made separate motions, appeals, and petitions to both state and federal courts in an attempt to gain a new trial.
On April 9, 1927, after all recourse in the Massachusetts courts had failed, Sacco and Vanzetti were sentenced to death. By then, the dignity in the words of the two men had turned them into powerful symbols of social justice for many throughout the world. Public agitation on their behalf by radicals, workers, immigrants, and Italians had become international in scope, and many demonstrations in the world's greatest cities, Paris, London, Mexico City, Buenos Aires, protested the unfairness of their trial.
The guard opened Sacco's cell door. Sacco was ready. His face was pale from his long confinement. Without a word, he took his place between the guards. Walking slowly but steadily, he traversed the 17 steps into the death chamber. He required no support and sat down in the chair. As the guards were finishing their work, Sacco cried out in Italian, "Long live anarchy." In English he shouted, "Farewell, my wife and child, and all my friends." Sacco marched to the electric chair at 12:11 and was pronounced dead at 12:19. Vanzetti entered the execution room at 12:20 and was declared dead at 12:26.
Sacco and Vanzetti were executed on August 23, 1927, a date that became a watershed in 20th century American history. It became the last of a long train of events that had driven any sense of utopian vision out of American life.